Welcome to Peace on the Street, a program by Peace Day Philly, 2021, unfortunately virtually, but better that than nothing. I see lots of people from the Ethical Society, and I see some grannies from Peace, Grannies for Peace. I see some other visitors from the Philly area, and I see some folks from outside of the area. So we'll give people another 30 seconds to join us before getting started. As a way of getting ourselves centered, I encourage everybody to take in a deep breath down to your big breath down to your belly, and just let it out with an audible sigh if you wish. I know I needed that since we had little technology gremlins a moment ago that Chris was able to figure out. Okay, let's get started. My name is Hugh Taft Morales. I am the leader of the Philadelphia Ethical Society, a humanist alternative to traditional religions on Rittenhouse Square. I've been supporting Peace Day Philly now for about a decade, ever since the amazing Lisa Parker reached out to me and asked me to get involved. She's been the real driving force for Peace Day Philly events, and she'll be helping out today with managing some of your questions that you could put in the chat. I hope that you go to the website of Peace Day Philly if you haven't already, and check out the other events that are occurring. Donate if you can, share your name and email with us, and let us get involved. You can get involved in Peace Day Philly and do some work. Thanks to Chris, who's helping with the technology right now. We're meeting with an incredible panel today so that we can discuss different ways that Philadelphians can help nurture peace on the streets, particularly from the perspective of the creative arts, trauma-informed policing, and through faith institutions. Through three very different perspectives on this issue, and we hope that'll generate some creative, thoughtful discussion. We're also together virtually to support each other in activism aimed at building a more peaceful world. And we need community and inspiration more than ever these days to do this work. We need community and inspiration because the pandemic has made life very hard on many people in Philadelphia, particularly under-resourced and historically oppressed populations. And all over the world, others are facing similar struggles. Add onto that the environmental degradation and climate crisis and the militarism that threatens our survival around the world. And we really need each other, and we need inspiration and community. In the preface of a book by Karen Armstrong called The Great Transformation, she wrote that, quote, "Unless there is some kind of spiritual revolution that can keep abreast with our technological genius, it is unlikely that we will save our planet. A purely rational education will not suffice," end quote. So while we're going to use our rational faculties today in sharing strategies for building peace, we need to do more. We need to help foment a revolution of spirit, whether you interpret that phrase religiously or secularly. We need a revolution of spirit that opens our hearts to working together. I'm grateful to all of you and for our committed and brilliant panelists and poet who have donated their time to be with us today. So let's start the program. Is Lataj Carter here? I want to make sure before I introduce.
Yeah, that's me.
All right, let me introduce you, Lataj. And he is a poet, performer, person. He started as a poet in Philadelphia's youth poetry movement. His work has spread into volunteering for Artwell's Limitless Voices Council and Arden Theater's Teen Arden Council, performances for the Philadelphia Slam League and various open mics and events, and a placement in the Apiary magazine, Apiary 9, Sanctuary. Lataj is occasionally seen writing, practicing, playing video games, working, or simply living. Lataj, thank you for being here today. He will read one of his poems to help us get started. The poem is titled Residential Property. Thank you, Lataj, all yours.
echoes of execution, sirens frequent concrete jungles. Violence is a nightly affair, a puzzle hunt, metal souls lying down, caution clothed as casual. No awe to violence as second nature, welded without a handle. Is the tragedy the act or being accustomed? The shocking of innocence matured into just another day, just another cycle, bent on withstanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Lataj. My goodness. We'll hear another poem from Lataj at the end of our program. Let's just take those words in with another deep breath. Let's get right to it. I'd like to introduce our three panelists for today. I'll introduce all three and then each one will share some perspectives with us. Naomi Washington Leapheart is the city's director of faith-based and interfaith affairs. She served as the faith work director for the National LGBTQ Task Force, coordinating the task force's public faith messaging and advocacy and leadership development work in faith communities. Before joining the task force, Reverend Naomi was a faith organizer for Power, a multi-faith, multiracial network of congregations in Southeast and Central Pennsylvania. The Ethical Society is a member there too. Please check out Power if you don't know about them. Reverend Naomi was named LGBTQ Faith Leader to Watch in 2019 by the Center for American Progress and is one of the Root 100. Altovise Love-Craighead is a chief inspector of the Philadelphia Police Department's Community Relations Bureau with more than 20 years of experience in law enforcement. Having lost her brother to murder in 1997, she is deeply committed to improving police officers' ability to recognize and address trauma through trauma-informed policing. She is the co-founder of Amir Healing Center, a center that provides holistic services to entire families affected by murder and violence. Briana Clarke is an artist, educator, and program manager for Artwell here in Philly. She has cultivated innovative and creative community spaces rooted in social practice and rituals serving both young people and adults. She's also teaching artist liaison with Artwell's board and volunteer time, and she volunteers time in support of Artwell's social media. Briana's past professional experience includes serving as program coordinator for Camp Sojourners Teen Leadership Institute and administrative assistant for the camp, creating the Leaders in Training curriculum, a middle school leadership and self-discovery program at Providence Center. Supervisor FABY Youth Philly Play Captains Initiative and artist in residence at Spiral Q. I have the pleasure to have known both Altovise and Naomi for a little bit. I'm very pleased to get to know Briana a little bit better as we got ready for this. I'm going to ask first Naomi to speak for 10 to 15 minutes about the work she does, her inspiration, things that work or don't work, or whatever you'd like to speak about, Naomi. Here's to you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much, Hugh and Lisa and Chris and everybody who has worked behind the scenes to make this a reality. We lament and grieve the fact that we are still staring at each other through screens, but we know that we are committed to keeping each other safe. And so we bear with it. And so thank you so much for assembling this conversation and for inviting me to be a part of it. Again, my name is Naomi, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm delighted to serve our city as the director for faith-based and interfaith affairs. And so I'm deeply, deeply concerned about how ideas and concepts get baptized in faith communities before they get introduced into the general public narrative. A concept like peace has spiritual implications, as Hugh said, has faith implications, moral implications. And so I want to say a bit about how what I'm calling the protocols of peace have been determined, and I think misdetermined, within faith communities. And so I'm going to sort of admit the ways in which faith communities have contributed, I think, to a misrepresentation and misunderstanding of peace, and then hopefully say a little bit about how I think faith communities can help to restore the notion of true peace in our community. So the protocols of peace, the terms of peace, I think have been co-opted by what we might call the violent imperialist empire within which we live. So peace is typically defined as order, right? The idea that everyone is in line and in submission. I'm going to suggest that that's actually not true peace. It's not fully true peace anyway. Sometimes peace is actively defined as quiet or tranquility. I mean, we have the colloquial expression peace and quiet, as if those two things always go together. So peace, if you've got loud protest, for example, the dominant narrative suggests that that can't possibly be a site of peace, that group that's loud cannot possibly be interested in peace. So we've got peace and quiet as synonyms going together in the dominant narrative about peace. I also think peace has been defined as uniformity, right? That we should erase differences and focus instead on how and why we are the same. But the fact of the matter is we are different. And we may not be innately or naturally all that different, but we certainly have been made different, right? Within the context of our society. We've been made different because we live in different places. We earn different income. We have different levels of formal education, right? And so a peace that is uniform erases differences and promotes what I think are shallow relationships. We can't really get to the meat, to the heart of true relationship without first confronting and appreciating the fact that we are different and the ways that we are different. I also think lastly, the protocols of peace have determined that violence is a strategy for bringing about peace. That war, for example, is done in service to peace. But what I would say is that peace actually can't be sustained by force. Peace cannot be coercive, right? And so, we also think about peace. I just thought of this. This is another thing I would say that is part of the dominant narrative of peace. Peace is a destination, right? It's like a static condition. And when we're there, right? We arrive at peace. But instead, I would say, peace is a pretty dynamic process. We don't arrive at peace. We, I think, continually live into peace. Peace is a decision, just like love is, right? That love is a daily decision. Well, what if peace was a daily decision? So I said all of that to say that I think the protocols of peace are determined, right, outside of the thoughtful, kind of morally courageous folks that make up faith and spiritual communities. And I think that many people of faith have unwittingly sometimes, or maybe even deliberately, contributed to a peace narrative that actually represses efforts to make peace, because we want peace to be quiet. We don't want it to be agitative. We don't want it to be conflictual, right? But what I've learned over time doing work to promote peace in congregations, in neighborhoods, and in political environments, right, is that peace is actually agitative. Peace is a process that disrupts and interrupts the status quo of violence as the way we solve our problems, violence as the way we force people to comply, violence as the way we erase differences. So true peace, I think, must be rooted in the reality that peace is not the absence of tension or conflict, right? But instead might be an invitation to conflict that is productive. And then on the other side of that productive conflict, we have what we might experience as peace. So peace as conflictual, peace as disruptive, not as being nice, right? I think the tyranny of niceness has also taken over many of our faith communities and our society, right? If you can't say it to me nicely, then what you're saying must not be correct. Well, no, that sometimes we get loud, sometimes we use strong language because we're hurting and we see others in our society hurting. We can all admit that we've seen over the last 18 months, certainly, right? Calls for peace that seem hollow in light of what's going on. You know, we've lost so many people to COVID-19. We've lost so many people to gun violence here in our city. And it's time to be loud in the name of peace, in the name of peace. And so I would just close by saying a true peace must be measured not by its ability to be quiet or to promote uniformity or to silence or erase differences, but in its ability to bring about justice. As Martin Luther King said in Stride Toward Freedom in 1958, true peace is not merely the absence of tension. It is the presence of justice. So thank you so much, Hugh and Lisa, and I'm looking forward to this conversation with the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Naomi, very much. Appreciate that. Boy, there's a lot there. Peace is an ever constant process, a daily decision. Religious communities, you're brave to come out and just say religious communities don't get it all right all the time due to fear or resistance or wanting to be nice, and that peace can be loud and messy and conflictual and descriptive. So with that, somebody who certainly knows that making peace can be conflict-filled, I'll turn it over to Altovise, who will speak about her experience promoting trauma-informed policing. Altovise, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I think I'd like to start by just telling you about me and my personal story. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I grew up in the Germantown section of the city. We were a very close-knit family. My 3 sisters and 1 brother were raised by my mom, who was a single mother. She worked at the prison system as a drug and alcohol counselor and sold Mary Kay cosmetics on the side to make ends meet. She would often tell us to sell the Mary Kay cosmetics at school. And then when we come home, she'd tell us to keep the money for the little incidentals we needed. I was aware from a very young age that we didn't have much and not to ask for much. I remember growing up, hanging out with my sisters and 2 girlfriends when we were teenagers, monitoring the police to make sure they were doing the right thing. We called ourselves the FBI. I don't know where this interest in making sure people were doing the right thing came from, but it led me to enter the Philadelphia Police Academy. My sister and girlfriends applied to join the police academy as well, but I was the only one to keep at it. Now, 27 years later, I'm a chief inspector with the Philadelphia Police Department. As you know, the police department is the 4th largest department in the country with over 6,000 sworn members and 800 civilian personnel. I was recently assigned to the Central Police Division, where I oversaw an area that had 158,000 residents, 30,000 daily visitors, and 600 police officers. I am now a chief inspector assigned to the Community Relations Bureau, where I can engage community members all over the city. I started in patrol and then worked as a detective. For 2 years, I investigated international terrorism with the FBI, but I was drawn back to my community and the original reasons why I got into policing in the first place. With my ongoing work as a police chief inspector of the Community Relations Bureau, my recent work with the Deputy Commissioner within Victim Services, where I had the opportunity to institute system-wide policy tied to trauma-informed policing, and with opportunities to give talks like this, I feel like in many ways, my work is coming to a powerful full circle. And that's because of something that happened back in 1997. On March 26, 1997, my family's world was shattered when my only brother, Emir Green, was murdered while involved in street drug activity. As it states on the website of Emir, Every Murder is Real, a nonprofit my mother and sisters and I created in honor of my brother to support other families and community members dealing with the trauma of violence and homicide by promoting healing. My brother was a good son and a protective brother. My brother was a comedian. He was always the life of the party. He was the type of person who through his laughter could make people feel better and was always sensitive to how other people felt. I can tell you all the things that happened to him that led to his murder, which includes deep-seated racism so many African Americans still confront, as well as abuse from a heroin-addicted father from whom he felt he needed to protect us. His search for a father figure outside the house on the streets, where he got involved with the wrong people whom he thought were his friends. I can tell you all about my brother's deep desire for acceptance that led to activity in street drug sales. I'm not condoning any of this, just trying to give a fuller picture of my brother, a fuller picture that's never viewed. Because when you're murdered while involved in street drug activity, what often happens is the whole of the person who got murdered, what he was like, who he truly was, what happened to him, the struggles he dealt with, the family's deep loss, all the collateral damage, and even the murder itself, it all gets overshadowed by the illegal activity. Much of what I heard by officers was just another drug dealer off the streets. Even family and friends would just dismissively say things like, "What did you expect?" Or "When are you going to get over this?" There was and still is little to no discussion about the causes or the impact of the murder on the family and our community, or who the murder victim was and what happened to him along the way before his murder. Because I've experienced both sides, I can tell you there's a lot to be gained on both sides if our police are more trauma informed. If we have greater understanding of the causes and impact of murders like this, the people behind the statistics. There's some police officers who already seem to have an intuition about all of this. There are several who stand out in my mind during the time my brother was murdered, who were compassionate and supportive. But many of us, most police officers, don't come to the force with this intuition and understanding. So, each one of us as police officers can play a role in demonstrating to people in our communities, especially our children and teenagers, that their current trauma-filled perception of the world and the people around them can change. Yet, it's important that we are able to see signs of trauma in ourselves, seek out support from fellow officers and others who can help when needed. Otherwise, our internalized trauma, left unaddressed, can contribute to negative consequences, unnecessary police-related confrontations, and even suicide within the force. As I reflect over the last year, the killing of George Floyd at the hands of police, the killing of Walter Wallace in Philadelphia at the hands of police, and protests to bring attention to these atrocities, and ultimately the civil unrest, I believe police can work towards peace. This can be done through simple tasks within the realm of 3 categories: safety and security, ventilation and validation, prediction and preparation. This not only improves policing in the law enforcement profession by making it better, but it also provides an opportunity to develop relationships, build trust, and arrive at peace. Thank you.
Thanks, Altovise, very much. I appreciate you for what you do and who you are. You're an inspiration. Let me now turn to Briana, are you ready to go? Tell us a little bit about your experience, where you come from, and the work you're doing at Artwell. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I wanted to start off with this question. I actually asked this question at our staff meeting this morning. So I said, if Philadelphia was a canvas, and there was a painting of Philadelphia on the canvas, what would you add to that painting? And what might you paint over? And some of the answers that I got was that someone would paint a top of the line school with everything that you can imagine in it. Someone said that they would paint over new developments and coffee shops and paint back family-owned businesses, homes and green spaces. Someone said that they would paint more closed off streets for more gathering and playing, and painting accessible and affordable things to do in the city for children. So I could have easily asked you, what do you think our community needs, right? But asking this question in this way is a way to get you to activate your imagination and to think big. So this is an example of the creative approach that Artwell takes to some of these questions. What does it look like when the power of imagination is valued for expressing ourselves and building community? And I love the idea that everything created must first be imagined. I started working at Artwell in 2015. I was a teaching artist, and now I'm currently the program director. How I came across Artwell was actually partnering with another community organization that I was working with at the time. And they were offering weekend workshops, and I was there supporting with the other organization. I was like, man, this is cool. Like, they're using art, but like not art in the way that I'm used to. And so I connected with someone, the person who was facilitating at the time, who was now actually a friend and a former Artwell employee. So I connected with them and I asked for more information. I was intrigued by their approach to art and using art as a tool to self-express. And they were discussing identity. They were talking about social justice, and this is all through art. And I thought that was cool. And it also felt familiar. So a little bit about myself. I have been involved in arts and community organizations my entire life. From age 6, I started attending the Southwest Community Arts Center. If you've been around for a while, you might have heard of it. It was on 47th and Woodland. And I used to take my backpack after school and go up to the Southwest Community Arts Center. And I attended from age 6 throughout middle school. And when I went off to a middle school, I still traveled back because the art center was in my neighborhood. I would still go there after school. And through this organization, I was able to go to community events, had volunteer opportunities. I was exploring different colleges. I was able to get my art displayed as a child. And through this organization, I also received a scholarship to attend Moore College of Arts YALL program in middle school and high school, and then University of the Arts as a kid. So I'm just sharing this I'm telling the story to share the impact of a small organization and the ability to have this safe space, to have a place to go after school where my mom knew I was safe. And I also had an impact on the community and had mentors and experiences that I probably wouldn't have had if this organization didn't exist. So it's a result of a very small organization that had a great impact, who invested in arts, the youth, and the community that they were in. So when I found out about Artwell, I actually was working as a direct support specialist for individuals with developmental disabilities. And although I enjoy caring for people, there was something that was missing. And that was that. I had done it my entire life. And so when I met the employee from Artwell, it was perfect timing. And me connecting with Artwell was an act of self-care for myself at that moment, because I was disconnected from the arts for so long. And not only from the arts, from also being involved in the community. So I started working with Artwell. And a little bit about our work. We typically work with 15 to 18 schools, our partners, a year. And we're in 2 to 5 classrooms in each of those schools. And so we provide art-based workshops during the school day. And so they're not your typical art classes, but we use art as a vehicle for social emotional learning, for trauma-informed practice, and a healing outlet to express challenges, pain, joy, pride, love. And I really believe there's strength in arts initiatives, and especially when they have people who are part of the community involved. So we're talking about peace, and I think a lot of my approach to peace is around healing. And when we're exposed to various forms of crime, violence, and trauma, often it's difficult to find a way to articulate your feelings, right? And art allows people to express themselves in nonverbal ways. And even in the verbal ways, it provides a different avenue to do so, right? You know, you have singers, you have poets, they can still use their voice, but it is in a different way. It's still a creative outlet. And in addition to the capacity to help us process our feelings and heal from trauma through the arts, it also has the power to bring people together and foster social change. And that can be through poetry, through performance art, through music. We see this all the time. Protest signs. Did I say music? Music, any kind of art. So a lot of times when people participate in our workshops, whether it be youth or adults, they always say like, I'm not artistic, or I don't know how to draw. And Artwell doesn't focus on that at all. We focus on the process and not the product. We also focus on the spaces that we create, and we focus on the existing space. How do we make the space safe? How is it healing? How is it celebratory? And how can we make sure that we gain awareness of the things that are already happening in the space to be able to respond? So our work is preventative, but it's also responsive. And what that looks like in the classroom is that we always leave space for student voice. We always make sure to open and close our workshops, whether that be just like a mindfulness moment at the beginning, then we get to our art activity and we do some type of closing. It could be a clap, it can be something very simple, but we always make sure to establish that space for the time that we're with the groups that we're with. And then as far as being responsive, Artwell is a collaborative, so we work collaboratively as a staff. Our teaching artists work together, and we work together with our partners. So before we go into our partners' sites, we try to have conversations about, you know, what's needed. Like, do you have any new teachers? What teachers need support? What kind of things happened over the past year? How can we address that through art? There was a school last year that actually reached out to us that experienced a lot of loss due to gun violence, and their teachers needed support. We actually haven't worked with their students yet. And someone said, man, we have monthly PDs. It would be really great for Artwell to create a space for people to just unpack the things that they've experienced. And we didn't come in and offer any hard skills. It literally was just a time for people for them to have a space facilitated, so they can talk about all of the things that they experienced. So I was talking about teachers, and we know that teachers and students' emotions and behaviors impact one another, right? So it's great that we have the opportunity to work with teachers as well. And as students in our communities have adverse experiences and they cope and adapt to those experiences, teachers can be impacted simultaneously, whether it be negative or positive way. So not only do teachers need space too, it also helps having access to teachers and students. It also helps us to spread the philosophy of our work and deepen our partnerships. I know our work isn't the answer to every problem. Like, we all know there's a lot of systemic change that needs to happen, but I believe if we plant these seeds and we water them, they sprout, we continue to water them so they can grow, that we can grow something bigger. Whether that be helping our youth to grow into them full selves, to spread the word about art, to possibly become a teacher and artist, to be a leader in their community, to have deeper connections with their family members, have tools to process things with their family members. Yeah, so I'm always thinking about how can we deepen our work? That's a question that's coming up a lot. How can we deepen our work beyond the classroom? How can we create detailing spaces in the community? And also set up an ecosystem where those people in the community can then create other spaces. That's the idea, that we can just continue to build. And yeah, I think that's it.
Thanks, Briana. I appreciate it very much. Thank you to you and to Altovise and to Naomi. All three of you experience some trauma in your work as you support people who have experienced violence personally or in your families or in the neighborhoods. And like Naomi mentioning about the need for work in faith communities to sort of process the trauma so that people can step up and be braver. Altovise obviously sees it all the time in her work with the police department. And Briana mentioned teachers who are also on the front line. So I just want to thank you three, because you do get exposed to a lot of trauma in your work as you help other people, and you need to be healed as well. I remember a film we saw a couple of years ago that had a number of police officers in it called Who Cares for the Caregivers, which experience how deep we need to do our work in healing in our society. So we're going to get into some questions, but I want to first I want to mention to our panelists after your presentations, I'm going to add a little bit more pressure. I'm going to come back to the three of you for one comment or question in a couple of minutes for one of the other panelists before I open it up to Q&A. So if you have a question you'd like to ask one of the other panelists, or if you have a comment following up on something that one of the other panelists said, I'd love for you to do that. And if you want to pass, you can pass too, but I'm going to call on you. For everybody else who's attending tonight, when we go to taking questions, you can raise your hands in the reactions tab at the bottom of your screen, or you can send questions in the chat to Lisa Parker, who will share them with me, and I'll weave them into our Q&A time. Also, you may have noticed there are a lot of Lisa Parker names on our participants lists. If you are not Lisa Parker and you know how to, please change your name so that it's your name, so that we can call on you if you have a question or address you when I see you. So I want to first, since we're about halfway through, just encourage everybody to take a literal 30-second stretch break by reaching your hands up, get your bodies moving, whatever you want to do. If you want to stand up, you can stand up, but try to get the blood running to get into our Q&A with regenerated energy would be great. And as you're doing that, stretching out, moving the body a little bit, maybe taking another couple of deep breaths. I want to give an opportunity for a group growing peace in Philadelphia to share a little bit, just a couple of minutes, if Emily will step in and speak a little bit about the AntiViolence Partnership of Philadelphia. Emily DiCarlo, LCSW, Youth Violence Outreach and Program Director for AntiViolence Partnership of Philadelphia. Emily?
Hi, thanks everyone. Hi, thanks to all the speakers tonight too. This has been great. Thanks for having me. I am Emily DiCarlo. I am with the AntiViolence Partnership of Philadelphia. We are a nonprofit agency that has been in Philadelphia serving victims of violent crime since 1983, so coming up on our 40-year anniversary. We serve victims of crime in Philadelphia in 3 different programs. We have a victim service program, which houses, we are the victim service agency for West and Southwest Philadelphia. So anyone who's been the victim of a crime in the 12th, 16th, 18th, or 19th police districts in West Southwest can reach out to AVP if they've been the victim of a crime with help with victim compensation, help through the court process, help with case management, any of those needs that you might have as a result of being a victim of a crime. We also have the Families of Murder Victims program that is housed in the district attorney's office. And we are there helping families go through the homicide trial process. So anybody in Philadelphia who is the family member or co-victim of homicide can have support through that process through AVP. And then we have counseling center programs. So we have a free counseling center for any victim of crime in Philadelphia. We don't require insurance. We don't require proof of income, proof of residency, proof of citizenship. You can reach out to AVP and you can be added to our wait list. I would mention that given the homicide rate in Philadelphia and other violent crimes throughout the pandemic, that we have a pretty lengthy wait list right now for services, but that we are free to anyone who needs that service. And then I am the director of our Youth Violence Outreach Initiative. And so similar to some of the folks who spoke, we provide counseling and therapeutic group services to youth who've been impacted by violent crime. We provide therapy in school and other community-based settings. So we're in some rec centers, some churches, and about 30 schools in Philadelphia providing therapy to youth ages 5 to 22 who have been impacted by violence. I feel like that was a quick rundown. I will put the website for AVP in the chat box, which has all of our information and where you can find referral forms and contact information for us.
Thank you, Emily. Appreciate that very much, and good luck with your work. I hope you can stick around, and if you have questions for our panelists, to go ahead and join the discussion as well.
Thank you.
I'll mention one other group that is doing some great work that we contacted earlier, Philly Truce AP. Philly Truce app is a great organization. You can check out www.phillytruce.com and find out what they're doing. It puts residents in direct contact with 24/7 trained mediators. So trying to use technology in a way to try to make sure that the first response to conflict and violence includes the option of peaceful trained mediation, which we need so much more of. Let me now go and I'll throw it to our 3 panelists and see whether any of you have a question or comment for one of the other panelists. If you would just give me a little wave of your hand in your screen, I'll turn to you and see whether you can start us off. Got that pressure on our panelists again.
I actually have a question for both of them.
Thanks, Altovise.
For Reverend Naomi, I saw that you coordinated public faith messaging in your previous work. And I wonder, what would that messaging look like for peace for our city?
Yeah, this is something I think a lot about. So thank you for that question. I think that, let me just tell you what the challenge was in my prior position. And I think it's a challenge no matter what the issue area is. So we were talking about legislative equality and justice for LGBTQ folks. And we're talking about peace tonight. I think a challenge with faith communities is faith communities are, I think, trained both formally and informally to have one message. And that message is connected to the doctrinal foundation of the faith community, right? So I was brought up in a Christian faith community, and we had one message, which was to get everybody to kind of join the Christian community, right? And so, I think that we see the same kind of challenge when we want to talk about peace and engage faith communities. Often faith communities believe that they have the answer to peace. Christian faith communities, Jesus is the answer to peace. I'm talking about Christians because I'm a Christian, and I can talk about Christians. And I'm not suggesting that there isn't something within our sacred texts, within our faith traditions, that inspires those of us who are members of those traditions to be peaceful. I'm not suggesting that at all. But I think external messaging or public-facing messaging has to take seriously the notion that people shouldn't have to say yes to Jesus in order to be a part of peace promoting or peace cultivating. I like what you said, Hugh, peace growing programming, right? And that if the person never comes to Jesus, right, my faith community has to still be in relationship. I mean, that's what we should be doing. We should be in loving and respectful relationship with everybody else who occupies the planet, right? Whether or not they sign on the dotted line, to be crass, to join the faith community, or to accept the spiritual invitation that faith communities are often extending. So I would say that one message that I have been talking to my colleagues around the city, in the city government rather, about peace promotion is we need each other to survive. I'm drawing on a gospel song that is popular within Christian communities called "I Need You to Survive," right? And I love that it's a play on words. It's me telling someone else, I need for you to stay alive. I need for you to survive. But also that there's something about my quality of living that is diminished if you don't survive. So like, I need you to survive, because I can't, the part that's not spoken is, I can't survive if you don't, right? And that to me is a message that I think faith communities from all traditions can get around, right? That we actually are tethered together. And we forget that, I think, because there's so many ways our society tries to pretend we're not. We're fiercely independent, and we're, right. I don't live in the same section of the city as you, and so I never pass by your neighborhood and whatever, but we all are. If COVID has taught us nothing else, right, it's that your life necessarily impacts mine, right? And so that message, I need you to survive, is, I think, a message that could inspire people who might be engaged in violent solutions to problems to be like, wow, so you care whether I live or die? You need me to be alive? Say more about that, right? So that's one message that I would put everywhere. Put everywhere. And a refrain. Imagine if everybody in Philly had this refrain on our lips, right? Hi, I need you to survive. Hi, what's your name? Okay, I need you to survive, right? So that's one public-facing message that's grounded in faith and spirituality and moral courage, but isn't connected to any religious perspective, any particular religious perspective that I would use to promote peace in Philly.
Thank you so much for that, Naomi, because I know in my own faith communities, we can sort of become, in times of stress, so focused on our own group and our little tribe, right? And we forget that outward looking thing. That's fantastic. Altovise, would you share your question for Briana?
I saw that when she does her work, she likes using rituals. And I wondered what types of ritual she would use, and where do those rituals come from? What cultural background, what group of people, what part of the world?
Yeah. So I'm gonna try and refrain from connecting it to a group of people, but I think the rituals are usually come from the people in the space. So say if, say if we have a theme in a certain class, we might build a ritual around that. Or there's like more traditional rituals where like we just breathe at the beginning, right? We learn different types of breaths. Or maybe it's a class that needs a lot of support with supporting one another. And so we might go and establish a ritual. It's like, we're always going to do shout outs at the end, every time, just so you can get into that practice, being comfortable with sharing gratitude, being comfortable with receiving compliments. So yeah, and I'm sure a lot of our rituals are rooted in like cultural practices, but not like a specific like one that we like exclusively say like this ritual is from this place and we do it because of this. Hope that answered your question. Did I answer your question?
It did. Thank you so much.
Being where you're at, Briana, is so much part of great creativity. So I can see why you draw from the people you're with at that time. But that's got to be what it. So let me just turn to Briana. Do you or Naomi have one question for either of the other panelists? Because we all have a bunch of questions I'll go to from our audience in a second, but I want to give you first a shot at that if you'd like.
Yeah, I have one. It always comes up in spaces like this. I think when we're talking about building, a lot of us are usually coming from very small organizations, like leaders who are very passionate about the work they're doing and not necessarily like having all the support. So I'm always curious about coalition building and people's ideas around that and how can we build strong coalitions and to do the work together. Like Reverend Naomi said, like we need each other to survive. We do, I believe that. But like just, it's not a straightforward question. I'm just curious, like if you've been thinking about it, what it looks like to build strong coalitions. And also coalitions of different, the three of us are on here. We have, we're representing 3 different types of organizations that all trying to do similar work. So I guess just what else.
Who wants to take that? I mean, certainly, Naomi, you've been in the middle of coalition building the last few years. But
yeah, I mean, it's hard. So it's not efficient. And that's why it doesn't get done often enough. And when it's done, it isn't done well. I think we are in a society that highly values and prioritizes efficiency. Get it done in the quickest amount of time possible with fewest dollars possible, right? And coalition building actually requires us to slow down. We build, at the speed of trust, work at the speed of trust. We mess up and have to go back. We took 5 steps forward and now something happened. So now we got to go 6 steps back, right? It's an expensive notion, both in terms of time and in energy. And so this is part of the cultural shift that needs to happen. I mean, we're talking about a cultural shift related to violence. We also need, I think, a cultural shift related to time. Time is actually not money. Like, no, it isn't. I mean, I get what that means. And when we see time as money, we won't spend the time that we need to spend on relationships and on deepening our intimacy so that we can go out here and do hard work. I mean, we've already talked about how the trauma is just swirling around, right? We're carrying past stuff. We get traumatized every day at work, whatever. And so, it takes time. You are both working on your own trauma, as Altovise is saying, and you out here trying to mediate how people are acting from their trauma in their neighborhoods, right? And so I don't mean to be Debbie Downer, but I just think that we need to find organizations that are willing to philanthropically support the time it takes to build coalitions well, right? So that's not a one-time grant that's going to be out. No, that's a long-term investment in the health of a coalition, right? But you've already said it, Briana. I mean, that's the only thing that really works, right? When people from wildly different social locations and lived experiences come together to try to put this big brain trust around a problem to get to a solution.
And if I can add to that, and then I'm going to start with the questions from our guest. The first one will come to Altovise. But I did want to add on coalition building a couple of rules of thumb that I have used has been, first of all, come with more curiosity than anything else to learn about other people, because so often we have our own ideas of what's going to grow peace in the world that we live in and we walk around in, and we don't walk around in other people's shoes. And we don't walk around in other people's worlds. And so to try to build a coalition first by getting to know each other, build the relationships first, not build the agenda first. You want to end a group of progressives trying to get together, to work together, start your meeting by saying, okay, what ideas do you have? What do you want to do? And you'll get 55 ideas and you'll spend the rest of your time arguing about it. So you've got to start up by learning about the individuals, I think, and building those relationships. So let me go to some questions from the audience. I've been patient because they've been stacking up. Altovise, this is a question to you. Does the police department have specific plans to train or give offers or insights into dealing with mentally challenged folk or people under the influence, people who are not their right self at the moment? This was part of a number of points being brought up after some publicized number of violent incidents in Philly recently. That's a question. And any specific plans to train or funding or initiatives in that regard?
So the police commissioner has already implemented a new script for our 911 dispatchers, where they are trained to ask specific questions related to mental health issues to help identify what the issues are before they dispatch officers there. And they are working in coordination with the Department of Behavioral Health to do co-response. In addition to that, we have what we call crisis intervention teams. These are police officers that are specially trained by the Department of Behavioral Health to identify these issues and to use tactics that are not typical police tactics to address those people that are in crisis. And so that work continues to grow as we move forward.
Thanks for that. A big problem in Philly, obviously, is gun violence. One person asked, in addition to voting and advocacy generally, what can citizens do to help solve Philly's gun problem? Does anybody have anything more specific than those two general things of vote for candidates who are in favor of a sensible gun policy and advocate for sensible gun laws? Is there anything more specific that any of our panelists have in their minds now to offer?
This often doesn't feel concrete enough, and so I'm naming that right away. You know, I really do think that what makes gun violence so kind of prolific, not just in our city, but in our country, is a culture of violence, a culture that permits violence to be a strategy for solving our problems, for enacting revenge, for having a bad day. I mean, if we think about all of the ways we get done what we want to get done, it's all violent, right? Whether we're talking about economic violence, political violence, social violence, right? We are harming bodies. We're harming minds. That's violence to me. That's how I'm defining violence. harming bodies and harming minds, you know, diminishing spirit, right? And so I think that one of the things that we can do every day is to seek to undermine the culture of violence that is around us. It's like addressing the water we're swimming in, right? And so that's what I mean when I say adulting doesn't feel concrete enough. Like I want to go and take the gun off the, you know, take all the bullets off the shelves or something like that. Well, I mean, hey, that would be, could we do that? Could we just buy up all the ammunition or something? I don't know. But I think also what we need to do is address the water we're swimming in, the cultural water of violence. And so how can we, you know, every parenting decision, you know, parents, we got to decide, are we going to be violent here? And it doesn't, you know, violent can be, you know, breaking a kid's spirit. Violent can be, you know, it doesn't mean enacting physical violence, but how do we keep up violence in our homes? How do we keep up violence at the workplace, right? If we can seek to address that stuff every day, I think it won't be such an attractive, powerful proposition, right? To go get a gun so that you're ready to use violence to solve problems or to, right? So I think that narrative shift, that culture shift needs to change, and we can help do that.
Thanks. Altovise or Briana, anything you want to add to the question about handguns?
I couldn't agree with Reverend Naomi more. There's this movie that was on, and it was like a marathon, and it's John Wick. And then it's like John Wick 1, John Wick 2, John Wick 3. And I know one of the social media discussions about those movies is how many people does he kill like in the first half hour? And I've had this discussion with my husband over and over and over again. And it was on this past weekend. And you know, I always say to him, oh no, not this movie again. But I sat down and like the first 20 minutes, he killed like 8 people. And this is what, like Reverend Naomi says, this is what we're swimming in. And then I think about how in my own personal life, my brother's story and how that's impacted my family. And I know my nephew, my brother's son, started out with challenges because in school, instead of people saying, how can we support him? How can we help to figure out what's going on with him? Somebody who's born without a father, they in turn would label him. And this creates a diminishing of the spirit. And so those are examples to Reverend Naomi's point that we have to really look at the water we're swimming in.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to 2 folks who've been waiting. I think Felicia is here from Philly Truce. Is that right, Felicia? If Felicia's here, she can unmute and share a little bit. Okay, she may be.
Just a second. I'm sorry.
Yep, that's all right. And then I'll turn to Roz after that.
Hello, excuse me. So my name is Mazie. I work with Felicia. I'm the co-founder of Philly Truce and
welcome.
The Philly Truce app. Thank you. Thanks everyone. Yeah, so basically, you know, we designed our app and the things we message around it to do just that, kind of to counter the culture of, you know, the kind of normalized violence. I mean, yeah, we could talk about, I think, the mass media and all that, but just as a Philadelphian, I think we also know, for those of us who grew up here, that it's, you know, it's kind of that kind of place. I mean, that's kind of what we learn as kids very early here, to just exactly where to, you know, place that chip on your shoulder and how not to smile, you know, unfortunately. Yeah, not just Philly, that's true, but I mean, we're in Philly, so that's why I'm referring to Philly. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so the premise around the app is that the community should give this help that's needed, and the community that's able to see that help is needed should be there for those who need the help. So the app works on the premise that anyone with the app on their phone can hit get help. They can hit get help. They can give some basic info, which doesn't even have to be true, because we're going to be able to speak to them through the app. And that's just, if people want to protect their anonymity, we haven't found that people really have wanted to do that. It seems that if they understand enough that there's help available, they don't mind being forthright, which is what we need. So basically they hit the app, they say, this is my name, this is what's going on, this is my phone number, basic stuff. And we respond and we do an intake and we say, you know, if we think we can help you, you know, we'll assign a mediator. We're working now to solidify our, you know, referral relationships so that when people need other things, because they often do, that we can refer them to, you know, therapeutic services or whatever may be needed. So the general premise is that we as the community have to do it. I don't think there's enough police or programs or, you know, or any of this stuff to take care of just the number and the quantity and the quality of life issues that people deal with between their neighbors, you know, and, you know, so many, you know, we thought we would just be getting aunts and uncles and neighbors calling about young people. And, you know, we're getting 50-year-old people, 70-year-old people calling about what they're going through or what their adult children are going through, you know, 36, 37 years old, getting jumped by two other grown people. So just the quality of life in the city is you know, a contributing factor to,
Absolutely.
you know, so if you're, and these are people that have survived the streets and survived Philadelphia, and this is what they're doing. So, you know, if you're 15 to 16 and you can get a gun and that's what makes you feel safe, you know, that's probably what you're going to turn to. So we're just really encouraging the people to do it for themselves. And when we do encounter, you know, politicians, so on and so forth, we kind of ask them to help us put the people's, you know, the community sourced solutions in first place and get behind us and not try to stay, you know, stuck on this top-down approach to everything. So if anyone's interested, they can download the app on the App Store or Google Play. They can go to phillytruths.com and write us a message or get our number there. It's 267-45-TRUTHS. Pretty easy to remember. We do need community-based volunteer mediators. So if you work in the field, you already have a certain degree of education and experience, you could very easily, you know, be a mediator of sorts for Philly Truths. So that's what we do. Thanks for the time.
Thanks so much. Such an important tool because we got to use all of our strengths. I'd like to give a little time for Roz Pichardo to speak because I believe this is Roz Pichardo of Hollow Sunshine, who is living and breathing peace activism on the streets of Philadelphia. I'm going to put a link into a Philly Inquirer article about it, but Roz, please share with us.
Hi, everybody, I'm Roz. I just had a couple comments that I wanted to share about what's happening in my community of Kensington. So one issue that we've been having a lot is, so there's a lot of crisis going on around the city. However, Kensington, we're in the center of the opiate crisis. We're like the opiate, it's just like massive. However, there's a lot of stuff that's happening, shooting, rapes, overdoses. And when we call 911, they don't answer. When I mean they don't answer the phone. So I've had to call today 3 times for an overdose. Not sure if that person made it. So when we talk about service and people responding to crisis, they can't respond if 911 operators or dispatchers don't answer. And that's one of the, I don't know if you guys know, there's a massive shortage of dispatchers in Philadelphia. Another thing that kind of is frustrating is that I think Emily is her name, was saying that there's a long waiting list for services. I mean, this city can't afford any more waiting for people who are losing their children. You know, that's another issue. I know COVID has really hurt the city in such a way where, you know, it's frustrating, it's overwhelming. However, mothers and sisters can't wait weeks to talk to someone. I know my dad couldn't wait. He ultimately died after my brother's unsolved murder. So people can't afford to wait. If anything, COVID should have really put into play extra services for stuff like this. Homicides aren't going anywhere. Violence isn't going anywhere at the moment. And the COVID really made things worse because a lot of people lost their jobs, and now you got people selling, and now you're going to have an increase in body counts. You're going to have an increase in drug dealing. You have an increase of young people dealing drugs. So that's frustrating. Another thing that's been frustrating to me in my community of Kensington is how police deal with people in addiction. Where's the empathy? Where's the compassion for people who are in active addiction? Is frustrating because there's not enough officers who can deal with people in addiction or how to deal with someone who's going through a crisis. You know, I had someone on some drug that he took. It wasn't heroin, it wasn't PCP, it was some other stuff that had him in the middle of the street, just going completely nuts. And once he fell out, the officer thought it was okay to kind of like, hey, are you okay, by kicking him. Instead of kicking him in his foot, he's kicking him on his side. To me, it's like, how do we bridge the gap with communities and police officers, but also how do we put these services into place that it can function for our already underserved community? So that's my comment and semi-question, if anybody can help out with that.
Thank you so much, Roz. Let's make sure we get you and your film on a Peace Day Philly program soon, eh? Because the work I read about you is a labor of love. So thank you for doing it. Appreciate it. Let's turn a little bit to one of the things that Roz just mentioned. There was a question earlier, and I'd like our panelists to take hold of this. What interventions, grassroots or otherwise, do you think are most needed in the areas where violence and gangs, so much of the gang violence are young kids that are too easily pressed by pandemic, lack of job opportunities, into gang violence as a way to for self-esteem and advancement in their minds, at least. Could our panelists talk a little bit about working with young folks who have fallen into gangs? Who would like to start on that one?
I don't have specific information about working with young folks in gangs, but I know a person just through opportunity was able to open up her world. Grew up in West Philadelphia, has had family members murdered, but she was introduced by one person to the idea of piloting. Nothing she'd ever dreamed of, nothing she'd ever thought of. And as she trains towards this, just the light in her eyes. And so for me, it's always providing opportunity for folks who wouldn't normally have it. Open a door for somebody, make an introduction. provide encouragement in that way to push them to a new beginning or a different beginning or something they wouldn't normally have an opportunity to experience.
Thanks, Altovise. Anyone else want to take a go at that?
Yeah, I was gonna share a similar response. I think a lot of what is effective, a lot of what we need to make our work effective is involving community members and creating programs that not only just provides a service, but also creates opportunity while they're part of the program. When they leave, what happens when they leave that? And I think we have to start thinking bigger. And I say that for myself as well, because I'm thinking about that. You know, what happens when we leave the classrooms, right? They were able to have a healing space. They were able to connect with each other, but are we setting up opportunities for them to then leave that space and grow? Are we setting or experience new things, possibly get job opportunities? So I think as we start to think bigger like that, then we're hopefully developing more leaders to be in the community and help us with this work. And that's my answer. I don't have a split, but that's like the way that I'm thinking right now.
There's great information. Thank you very much, Briana. There's some great information in the chat that we'll save but definitely check out some of what's in the chat. You can save chat yourself. If you go to your chat button, there's a way to save it so you can get that. I do want to ask a question that was about partially answered in the chat, but maybe Altovise, you can say a little bit more. Are there organizations that unite families who have suffered loss due to homicide? Obviously, AMER is one such organization. Do you know of other organizations that people can reach out to as well?
Mothers in Charge. There's a bunch of victim service agencies throughout the city, Northwest Victim Services, Central Victim Services. We have that information on the police department's website, phillypolice.com. But there's a boatload of agencies out there for people to tap into, not just to support each other, but to get resources and help them navigate the criminal justice system. One of the issues when someone's murdered, you find yourself having to go to court or having to deal with police or having to talk to detectives, having to talk to the DA's office. And when you're grieving, your mind you're not able to process these steps that you have to take. It's like navigating in a maze. And so these organizations help people navigate through these types of places.
Appreciate that. One other, you mentioned in the chat, the GREAT program. You want to just mention that for folks who don't access the chat?
Yes, the police department offers gang resistance education and training. We offer that to young people ages 10 to 14. And what we do is we go to schools and the officers themselves do the presentations, and they give them scenarios and tools to try to resist joining gangs by trying to overcome peer pressure, or helping to support each other when someone else is feeling peer pressure. I put the number in the chat if anyone is interested.
Thanks. Briana, you had your hand up. Oh, no, okay. Could you mention, Altovise, just the film that you were involved with, Walking in My Shoes, for folks that don't know about it?
Yes, so there is a style of theater called theater of witness. And it was created by Taya Sepanuk. And what it does is it takes real life stories and weaves them together in what appears to be a play format, but the real people act out their stories. And I had worked with Taya in a previous piece called Beyond the Walls, Road to Redemption. What Taya often does is bring two opposing sides together. And in that piece, it was families impacted by homicide and violence with ex-offenders. And she came back to me during the time that Black men started to get killed by police over and over and over again, that, we I won't say started to, I'll say we started to see it in video, because it's my belief that it's possible that's happened before, we just didn't know it. And then police officers in turn were getting killed. Particularly, there was 5 officers in Dallas that was shot. And she reached out to me and said to, you know, she felt that my heart must be breaking, one, as an African-American female, but 2, as a police officer. And she wanted to know if there was something she could do and if we could work together. And I immediately texted her back, yes, with no idea what was in mind. And what we came up with was Walk in My Shoes. It brings 4 Philadelphia police officers, these are real police officers, together with 3 community members of color. And they talk about their own interactions with the other, with the idea of bringing us to a point where there's hope that we can come together and break down this divide between the two. We do film screenings. We still do film screenings. We actually have a nonprofit that is creating workshops for us, because we felt like it was our responsibility to make sure that when people see this, it's a heavy piece. I cry every time, that they can walk away not being left with this and not knowing what to do next. People often wanted to know, what can they do next? And so we want the workshops to help move people to action.
Thank you. I'll go to Naomi, who raised her hand, and then I'm going to go to our final poem, but we will have time for further discussion after the formal program ends for anybody who would like to stick around. Naomi, you had something you wanted to add, is that right?
Well, I just wanted to say, you know, the question around engaging young people, you know, I think a lot about this and about how often when we meet a person who is using violence to solve problems or, you know, affiliating with a gang, we've missed, it's like we've missed the opportunity, you know. And I'm not suggesting that people are irredeemable and that, you know, nothing can be done in terms of intervening like right in the middle of somebody's harmful activity. But I think that what we get wrong is we don't want to do, again, it's not efficient to do all of the preemptive stuff that you got to do to make sure that somebody, by the time they're 12, you know, knows that they are a dignified human being with innate value, regardless of extrinsic, you know, factors. You have innate value, and that you have tools and resources to solve your problems without using violence. Like, if you don't do all of that work, it's almost, you know, by the time the kid is 9, you know, oh well, because now they're swimming, right, in the same culture that we're swimming in. And so I really think that, you know, our investment in early childhood will really be the sign of our commitment to ending violence, right? People don't wake up and roll over and get out of the bed and decide, today is the day I'm gonna live a violent life. You know, it's a process. Just like we can grow peace, we can grow violence too. And so that's a process. And so, you know, I think that trying to throw a mentor at somebody who's 17 and, you know, is not living a teenager's life anymore, seems to me to be, it almost, I'll say it this way, it feels like an insult. And it says to people, you know, like, folk got mentors. Folk got opportunities to make money, and folk got, so when we present like, oh, a mentor is really what, people have already been mentored, is what I'm trying to say. Mentored by others who are also solving problems using violence, or also, right? And so it to me is a diminishment. People are creating an alternative reality for themselves that helps to serve them wherever they are, right? And so when we come in and act like people have not built whole worlds, whole strategies for, you know, folk who live in neighborhoods rife with violence know how to do so. You know what I'm saying? And so it almost feels like sometimes we swoop in as if we know how to live, you know, better than, but what people have done is created whole strategies, whole worlds around this. And to me, it's very, I mean, it's sophisticated. That's why I'm like, if we could just do that in a way that brought about the healing of the world, to build an alternative with its own, with rules and with joys and with, you know what I'm saying? Communities have done this. And so it's about tapping into, I think, the assets and the resources that people use perhaps to create a violent world and say, listen, you already know how to shape a world. Why not? Let's shape a world that doesn't have violence as its mandate. You know what I'm saying? But I think instead, so many of our solutions demonize people as if they woke up today and decided to you know, be on the news. No, that's not, you know. And so I just wanted to say that all the young people that are in my world, you know, they know by 5 what they're gonna, you know, I look at our daughter who's 15. She just turned 15. It's already done. And so I just want us to go earlier, right? Go earlier.
Thank you so much, Naomi. As you were speaking, I thought of a phrase Brian Stevenson uses that I like very much. You are more than the worst thing you've done. And we forget that over and over and over again. We have to speak to the best in people whenever we can. So I want to thank people to be here. As I said, I'm going to stay on for another 25, 30 minutes chatting with people about anything that's come up. Our panelists, so much have been given, and you all 3 of you have very busy lives. So I understand if you need to step off after this last poem, but if Altovise, Naomi, and Briana want to hang around, that'd be great. Otherwise, we'll field questions just in general and have a group chat. But to close us off, I want to emphasize that this is part of an emphasis on networking. So try to reconnect with the people that you saw today on this chat. You can email me, hughtm@gmail.com or leaderhugh@phillyethics.com. And I will try to get your answers to your questions or connect you to folks who were involved for today. Lataj Carter, we hope to hear from you a lot more than just this last poem, but if you would close us out for the formal part of our program with your poem, Rid the Vile. Lataj.
Thank you. Crusade against violence in search of peace, from stomping grounds to speaking please, disrupt dreams of having the peace as long as ignorance remains pleased, desperation for money trees, pressures incessant without ease, vision of faith for all to see, even if extremes are knee deep, violence lurking beneath concrete, shadows ready to jump in the street, New world blues hazing the community, pollute unity with senses of impurity, never be frail in the face of the impossible. Don't let bullets and threats become obstacles, denying the effort to spark the start of change by refusing to let righteousness echo in vain. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Lataj. I will refuse to let your righteousness echo in vain. Keep on writing, keep on sharing. I hope to meet you in person sometime. Thank you to Lisa Parker for her work with Peace Day Philly, for working some of the tech. Chris, thank you so much for helping with technology and getting us over, especially those early technological problems. Again, Altovise, Naomi, Briana, thank you so much. I got a bunch of questions I'd still like to ask you, so if you hang on, that'd be great, but appreciate you have families and you need some time. There was one question that we didn't get to, which I sort of alluded to, which is, where do you get your rejuvenation? How do you avoid burnout? So whatever you need to do to avoid burnout, I urge you to do that now. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll just take a 30-second break. I'll be back after I get some more water. And if Lisa, if you stay on, I'll be back and we can have a little bit more discussion for anybody who can remain. Thanks so much. I'll be back in 30. Oh, wow, look at all this busyness. I'll be done in about 2025, FYI.
So I was thinking maybe we could create a screening of Hello Sunshine and Walk in My Shoes together. That was my thinking. So I'll talk to Altovise about that.
That'd be fantastic.
And have discussion and workshopping afterward.
That'd be great. Sorry I didn't mute before, I realized that.
That's okay.
So is Briana still on? You have to go.
Oh, I just sent the message as you asked.
Oh, okay. Can I ask you one question?
Yeah.
Because in your work, in your work with school children, do you? I imagine you must run into this, and if you do, how do you handle it? The young people's attitudes about the police, whether they know or don't know individual police officers, or whether they have a certain image in their mind. How do you work with students, with or without art, when maybe just mentoring, in helping them figure out a way to engage in that area of discussion, so that they're safe? Maybe they're traumatized, maybe they're scared, or maybe they have stereotypes of what a police officer are about.
Yeah, I think it first boils down to determining what kind of space they want. You know, if it's a space to just, just express anger, right? Or if it's a space that they want to express anger and heal. If it's a space they want to express anger, heal, and do something about it. And once we figure that out, we help to cultivate that space, but definitely discussions. It doesn't even have to be art, like we can sit around and just talk. Poems, either guided by a prompt or them sharing whatever they want to share. Art, one of our sites, they didn't want to focus on trauma. And they felt like a lot of times, like, trauma is the center, and they wanted to focus on the joy. And so they expressed that themselves and wanted to have an exhibit and work on individual art projects that exuded Black joy. And so it depends, it looks different. I don't know. So
you're offering them a safe space to do what they need to do, it sounds like.
Yeah.
I didn't know whether
responsive, and it's the nature of our responsive work. Like if there's like a group of youth that's like, we want to do this thing, we don't have the resources, that like, we need somebody to back us up, we'll find ways to do that. But it's not like a one-size-fits-all approach to each space. You
mentioned you've worked with Lataj before, and I don't know, Lataj, if you want to weigh in. I'm curious, Lataj, whether that question I asked Briana just now about how young people process things, especially how you deal with police. If that's not something you want to talk about, just talk a little bit more about your writing and how you connect with Briana.
So yes, my writing, from personal experience, I've started writing around beginning of high school. Like in 8th grade, I started writing raps, and from 9th grade, it evolved into poetry. And then eventually, I was on stage, and then from there, that's actually where I started my volunteer work. And I eventually started working with volunteering. And then I'll say just recently, about like 2 or 3 years ago, met Briana at Artwell, like when she was a new face in the company. And then from there, just like I started working with her more, I started working with Artwell more. And that's kind of the current moment of my volunteering and poetry experience. And in relation to what you mentioned at first, I think the impact of violence on youth people is something that I think everyone could say is unprecedented, because that's what kind of influences them to doing such crimes. And for the homicide in Philadelphia, along with the rest of crime, and not just in Philadelphia, but in the United States, I think everyone now at least in the media, mass media, you know, CNN, Fox, CBS, they're all starting to see that now violence really influences the youth, whereas there's all these school shootings. Now, yes, it did start with Columbine, but I don't think, you know, the idea of school shootings, or at the very least, the idea of violence affecting youth wasn't really as prominent until a couple years ago. And from my experience, or at least from what I've witnessed, you know, as a youth, you never forget something traumatic. You know, from my experience, I knew of a student that had passed away while he was in school, and it hit everyone. You know, it hit everyone different. You know, the principal was affected by it. You know, the classmates, and that's something to think about. Like when you're just a young person, you're not even 21 yet, you haven't even reached adulthood yet, and suddenly there was someone just sitting next to you in class, and all of a sudden they're gone because there's violence in the city. You know, and you know they say bullets have no name. So just not just the fact, but the idea that someone can be affected by violence that easily, it shakes people up. It makes people realize that not only is this the world we live in, but there's not really any space for us to smile, or there's not really any space for us to express ourselves as much as we want to, because we go outside every day with the realization that something might happen to us. You know, the violence might happen upon us, or it might happen on somebody that we love, or someone who's close to us. And I think that's what it shakes up the youth. It definitely shakes up the youth, and also kind of leads to that distrust of everything. If you ever notice, like at this point, it not only are just the people kind of distrustful of the government, but if you see the youth, you'll see that there's a lot of them that are kind of distrustful of everything because of everything that's happening. You know, you already had COVID, and now you have, you know, police still shooting innocent civilians, and, you know, black on black crime, and so much of that's still happening to where not only they depressed, but they do distrust everything, and for a reason. Not like everything that just happened last year, you know, just happened out of nowhere. It's been going on, you know, over time, and it's gotten to a point where, you know, the youth they don't really see the world like they did before.
Thanks. Lataj, can I ask how old you are?
Yes, 20 and a half.
And are you looking to make poetry a focus of your life for the near future?
Of course. You know, not just, you know, I have like my personal life in mind, but right now I am working, but poetry has always been a focus in my life. It's always been, it's something that broke me out of my shell. It's something that made me more expressive and more sociable. And, you know, I would say it definitely changed my life. So poetry definitely is a focus. And, you know, aside from just poetry, just art and anything else that I'm really interested in.
Fantastic. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Lisa, would you like to share anything that has, I mean, there's been so much shared today. Our group is small. We can be casual. Is there anything you want to share that struck you, or anybody else?
I think in all the three panelists' statements, something that they said is about them personally. And I think that that's a really key issue. We go as individual human beings into situations, and we can handle them well or not so well, depending on where we're coming from. There's the situation itself, and we can't control that. But we also can come at things, you know, from a place of peace, from a place of compassion, from a place of wanting to understand rather than overreacting or you know, deciding what's up with the other person. So I thought that was striking that all three panelists in their own ways talked about how they're affected and they're aware of it, and that's a great thing in and of itself.
Yeah. We have two other folks that I know are on integrally involved in Peace Day Philly. Tom and Anisha are on. If you guys have anything you want to share, I'll just say this as you're thinking. I have been unable to save the chat, perhaps because it's a workshop mode, not because I can always share it otherwise. Chris, can that, or Lisa, can we make sure we share the chat? I'd love to get the printout of it.
Save it.
Yeah. Okay, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Tom, Anisha, anybody else want to share anything before we close up shop for the day?
I think Lisa hit it. What really struck me about the three panelists is how they came from their own experience and expanded it into how it relates to the city. And it was most helpful to have all three viewpoints. I thought it was very, very wonderful, informative panel.
Yeah, we were real lucky to get all three folks. So I'm grateful for that. Anyone have any closing words? Otherwise, I'll start packing because I need to be at Rittenhouse Square at 10:30. Is that correct?
10:30 tomorrow.
In front of the
10:30.
In front of the Ethical Society, and I'll
rendezvous.
Okay, we'll rendezvous there, and we'll be walking into the center of Rittenhouse Square. If anybody else is there, you want to show up Rittenhouse Square tomorrow, starting at the program starts at 11:30. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, 11:30 till 12:30.
So thank you, Lisa. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate everybody showing up.
Thank you, Lisa, for doing the facilitation. It was really great to have these panelists and, you know, have your way of working with them in a way that was very compassionate and informative at the same time.
Glad it came that way. Sometimes I got so many different things in my head, I don't know what I'm coming off like, so I'm glad it worked.
You definitely did. So
thank you,
say
Chris.
good night
Thank you,
to
Lisa.
everyone. Good night.
Bye, Hugh.
See you soon.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye, Chris.
Thank you.